Welcome back to Inside the Game with CNHI Sports. I'm George Bremer of CNHI Sports Indiana. We'll take you around the country to touch on some of the biggest headlines. Let's start, as we have been all month long, with college basketball and check in with Elton Hayes of CNHI Sports Pennsylvania and Kevin Brockway of CNHI Sports Indiana. And now it's time for our weekly spot with Elton Hayes of CNHI Sports Pennsylvania and Kevin Brockway of CNHI Sports Indiana. Guys, it's been a rough week for the Big Ten. I know all year long we've talked about how strong the conference is here on this show. All the net rankings, everything shows that, bears that out. But the first two rounds of the NCAA Tournament, not in any way what this league expected. Kevin, what can you say? 9 teams go into the tournament. Only one team still playing as we enter Sweet 16.
Yeah, I guess the best way to put it was the league was overrated. But, a lot of times when you perform well in December, it doesn't necessarily carry over into March. And I think that's what happened to this league. They certainly had to jump on everyone at that point of the year. But, as the season progressed, what I'm seeing on the court from covering the NCAA in the first weekend is a lot of athleticism from a lot of other teams around the country, and Big Ten teams having a hard time keeping up and keeping guys in front of them. And then, you've run into some miracle teams. You've run into Oral Roberts, playing above their heads, and certainly Loyola Chicago with Illinois as well. So I think the combination of that, maybe some teams that were underseeded a little bit in the tournament, and then also, some really athletic teams that were bad matchups, North Texas against Purdue being a prime example, a lot of quickness on the floor. Really hurt a lot of these Big Ten teams in tournament play.
Elton, how big of a problem is this for the conference? How do you bounce back from this?
I mean, I guess you pray that Michigan goes on a historic tear, starting with the Sweet 16 this weekend and kind of blows everyone out. But I don't think you can this year. I really don't. And I think next year, when we hear calls, if the Big Ten again is as good as it was in the regular season, I think people are going to kind of, look at that a little sideways. Like you said, 9 teams, which was the third most in March Madness history. And for us to go into the second week with just one of them standing, and, I'm sure you all watched that LSU game. Michigan didn't really look all that strong, for all two halves. It's a perception problem. The Big Ten is kind of the butt of a lot of other conference jokes for being pretentious, and it kind of overinflates itself. And, if you're, Alabama blowing out Maryland the way it did was just that. I'll get on my own rant about Turgeon, but, it's not a good look. It is not, it really isn't. So, the conference's hopes rest on Michigan's shoulders right now. That's a lot of pressure, and without Michigan's really not at full strength right now. So it could be a pretty bad year once this thing's all said and done.
What's interesting is I actually, I was on the Zoom call today with Shawan Howard, and I asked him about the surprise of that. And he said, I'll let you guys have fun with that. He goes, I'm just concerned about Michigan right now. He goes, I don't really think about. So it doesn't sound like he's rah-rah about the conference at this point. He just is hoping for them to advance. But they've got a tough matchup against FSU and Leonard Hamilton, who's an experienced coach who's been there before. And Florida State has a lot of length and a lot of athleticism, and it's going to be hard for Hunter Dickinson to score inside. They're going to have to find really creative ways to get him the basketball, because Leonard Hamilton can coach a little bit of defense.
No, there's no doubt about that. And then that's been the Big Ten's biggest problem is defense on both sides of the court. Figuring out how to stop other teams has been an obvious issue, but also finding a way to score against some of these teams has been a real problem for them. So, Kevin, I kind of wonder, you go back about a decade, to when Urban Meyer went to Ohio State, and it kind of changed the way the Big Ten recruited. You've seen, especially Ohio State's roster change in that time, but other schools kind of had to adapt and change how they do things as well. Does basketball need their version of that? Do they need somebody to come in and change the way business is done in the Big Ten?
Well, I think you've seen some, coaches try to go a little more up-tempo, guys like Richard Pitino, but it hasn't really worked out. Certainly Fran McCaffrey plays a little more of an up-tempo style, a little more of an offensive style. Tom Crean did a little bit at Indiana before Archie Miller came here. But you'd like a balance of it. You'd like to see, maybe a little more athleticism in the conference as well, a little more shooting from some teams. But you also have to execute in the half court down the stretch is very important in games. And that's one thing that, a lot of big teams do fairly well. So it's, it's cyclical sometimes. You look back to 2011, and I believe the Big East had 11 teams in, and they only had 2 go to the Sweet 16. So there's precedent. It does happen, and we'll see how the conference bounces back, and if Michigan can make that run to the Final Four. But really, your chances now are 1-16 for a team to break that national title drought right now, which is at 20 years and counting.
It's not good odds. Definitely a rough spot for the conference to be in. Elton, who's impressed you so far outside the Big Ten as the first 2 weeks of the tournament played out?
I got to say, Gonzaga. You mentioned them several times this year of, possibly being that team that could, the next team to go undefeated. And watching them, I was just like, okay, they're, they're legit. They're legit. I kind of ate a little crow on what I said about them earlier this year. They look good. Alabama, if Alabama can continue to hit threes at that incredible pace, I mean, anything can happen. I'm going to say Loyola Chicago, props to Sister Jean. But, hearing Porter Moser, sorry about that, his post-game press conference after they beat Illinois, which thank you all for not really, beating me up too much about that Illinois pick that I had. But he mentioned having having those guys like Kurtwig and Lucas Williamson, the 2 guys who were on that last team to go to make it far, and just having that experience. So, experience is key. You looked at Illinois, Io Desumu, Kofi Coburn, those guys, Curbelo looked really good during the regular season, but you put them in that tournament type environment, and when things get a little tough, you saw how the more seasoned guys on Loyola Chicago were able to handle things, and that experience is key. That it really is key. But yeah, Gonzaga, Loyola Chicago, Alabama, those teams look really good right now.
No doubt about that. Kevin, the women are also playing, obviously, their tournament underway. The Big Ten having a lot more success on that side of the bracket. How about the IU women into the Sweet 16 for the first time in school history?
Yeah, pretty amazing. And you've got, I believe 4, I'm trying to look this up, 4 or 5 women's teams that are in the Sweet 16 for the conference, including Indiana for the first time in school history. So very, certainly an impressive run for women's basketball in the conference, unlike the men. And, for Indiana, they've played terrific defense. In terms of, they've got a 13 and a 12 seed their first 2 rounds, but they've taken advantage of it. They held VCU to 32 points, and they held Belmont to 48 points. So the defense has really carried the day, and Grace Berger has been very good offensively as well. So they're going to have a tough one against top seed NC State on Saturday, though. Certainly going to be a rise up in level in terms of personnel. So it will be interesting to see how much further the Hoosiers can go.
And Elton, spring brings with it football pro days in particular. Penn State went through their big showcase today. What did you take away from the Nittany Lions?
Micah Parsons and Jason Owe are incredibly fast. There's a little they play different positions. Mike was a linebacker and Jason was a defensive end, but there was always this little friendly competition between the two on who's quicker. If my math is correct, I believe, according to Penn State's pro day numbers, Owe ran a 4.36 40 and Parsons ran a 4.39. So I guess Owe has a little bit of bragging rights, but just an all around, it looks like there were 8 guys out there today. A really cool story was Steven Gonzalez, who graduated last year, was signed as an undrafted free agent by the Arizona Cardinals, was released later on in August. He didn't get a chance to participate in Pro Day last year. They had him there today. So really, really cool to see that. Pat Fryermuth came off of his, he had that season-ending surgery last year. He participated in just catching drills and route running today. But, there's some big, fast guys. Got to look at some of them on that TV and said, I need to get in the gym. But no, it was there. Spring practice is in its second week right now. Last week, we found out that Penn State will not have a traditional blue-white spring scrimmage. Instead, on April 17th, they'll use that final practice as kind of like something at the Beaver Stadium where they're only going to allow first-year students to view. So things are slowly getting back to normal.
Slowly but surely. Kevin, I believe IU's Pro Day set for next week, but the real interest here in Bloomington right now concerning that men's basketball program, what are you hearing, if anything, on the coaching search?
Yeah, it's been a little slow going. I've heard different financial offers that were made to Brad Stevens that were fairly substantial, but I've heard that Brad Stevens likes the NBA. He enjoys the lifestyle. So he's staying in Boston. So for now, a bunch of they've talked to Calbert Chaney, former IU legend and Big Ten all-time leading scorer. They've talked to Mike Woodson a little bit, a former NBA coach who obviously was a point guard or a swingman on the 1980 IU basketball team. So they've reached out to some people with ties to the program, but nothing substantial to report as of this week as to any kind of final interviews or any kind of coaching finality on that search.
No doubt that'll be something to keep track of here as the weeks go on. Guys, the NCAA Tournament heating up, lots of upsets, but it sets up for a really interesting Sweet 16 and Elite 8 this week. I'm sure we'll have plenty more to talk about next week. Thanks a lot for your time.
Sounds good, y'all. You'll have a good week.
Thanks again to Elton and Kevin for their time. You can follow Elton and the Penn State Nittany Lions at EHDC12. You can follow Kevin and that IU basketball search at Kevin Brockway G1. Now let's check in on the NFL for our weekly spot with Bill Burt of CNHI Sports Boston. Now it's time for our weekly spot with Bill Burt. And Bill, kind of a quiet week in the NFL and it was expected. I mean, after the big deals got signed last week in free agency, things kind of slowed down. It's a depressed market. We all kind of knew this was coming, but it sounds like they might not be finished in New England. Do you put any stock into the idea that the Patriots are still sniffing around and might possibly make a move for Jimmy Garoppolo?
Depressed market in New England. I've never been this busy in all the 20-something years of free agency. And are they done? I don't know. No, I don't think they're done. I'm not saying it's a definite. I think if Jimmy Garoppolo is available, Bill Belichick's been on him. Belichick, as we found out during free agent signing, falls in love with players, like in high school, in college. And these are like 4 of these guys taken were guys he worked out diligently when they were never able to draft them due to unforeseen circumstances or some taken in the first round. I know Matthew Hudon, he wanted him badly. And yes, so he it's probably to a fault. It happens to a lot of guys. You see someone and you fall in love with them and you maybe wanted to coach them. So Jimmy Garoppolo in New England would be sort of the final straw. I mean, they don't have any big money left. They're going to have, I think as I saw 10, they have 9 draft picks. So they got to sign them. There's not a ton of money available. And next year's cap is not going to be great. So this is the Patriots for the next 2 years. But I personally, I believe that they're done for the most part. And, James White, they brought him back. They brought Lawrence Guy back. They brought David Andrews back. So they've done the impossible. Their top 2 or 3 free agents, arguably, they were able to bring them back and then bring in 9 other players, probably 8 of which are going to probably be starters immediately, 7 of them. So so in New England, I think they looked at this. They were ready for this. Now they were ready. They had to suffer. They went 7-9. That doesn't happen much around here in New England. So, yes, it's weird that literally there's been no movement. I think what we're seeing is, and we've seen it with a few guys, saw it there in Indianapolis, the 1-year contract happened with James White too. If I'm a player and I'm looking to make the hit, I'm signing a 1-year deal right now and give me decent money, not for really James White. It's like $3+ million with some 2.5 or 3 with some bonuses in there. But Hilton looks like, going to make 10, 11 million, borderline guaranteed. That's a good year's pay and set himself up for that $80, $90 million deal that he hopes he's going to get.
Yeah, I mean that's the goal now. Everybody wants to get that 1 year deal,
Mhm.
hit the market again next year. The salary cap goes up a little bit. The new TV deal will help, but not really till 2023 when you really start to see that
Mhm.
money come flowing in. So it's going to be an interesting situation, I think, as we head towards the draft here with some veterans. Maybe do you think some guys might wait it out now and say, well, if I know I've got $6 million in my back pocket from this team, I'm
Yep.
going to hang on a little bit, see what happens in the draft. See if somebody gets desperate and I maybe get a better 1 year offer somewhere else.
Yeah, there's not a lot of room though. That's the only problem. There's like 6 to 7 teams that have 10 million or more available, and then maybe there's a couple. I think I saw one with 15. So there's not a lot. But even then, you're going to go 1 year. So maybe go with the devil go with the team Maybe you take a little less. Maybe you take this is where the incentives work. You can get incentive laden contracts because you can throw that money ahead to next year. So if you believe you're going to get that big money, maybe you sign that $6 million with to make 6 or 7 million in incentives. Obviously, you got to be healthy. You got to meet your goals and your numbers. But this is a tough year. I mean, Robert Kraft was quoted the other day, not only in a story but in an interview about they lost billions of dollars here. This wasn't like we lost about 10 million apiece. So as a league, it was a B, and I think with a couple teams, it was several hundred million. These guys make $1 billion a year, and so they lost $1 billion or so this year. That's a lot. That's a lot of money. Now they have it. I mean, what I would argue is, and in New England, because Bob Kraft said I've never outlaid this much money ever in capital for free agents, and that's fine. You bought the team for 164 million. It's now worth about 2.5 billion. So I don't cry me a river here, but this is COVID, and you know what? It's hitting all at college sports. I mean, a lot of coaches have bonuses; they're not going to get them. A lot of coaches are having to cut assistants and cut their pay in half. And I think we're going to see more of that next year because I think the reverberations of this, same thing with baseball, are going to happen next year.
I absolutely agree. It's not something that's going to be done when everything gets back to quote unquote normal. You're going to feel it for a little while. It's going to take some time to recover. Speaking of baseball, it's spring in the Boston area. I know that means Red Sox. I know the baseball season's underway. People can check out the CNHI baseball preview in their papers this weekend and into early next week. How excited are you about a new baseball season, Bill?
Well, so in America, baseball is really the ugly stepchild right now, Cinderella. And so we got to get the slipper on. We got to get the midnight. We got to stay away from midnight. We got to get the slipper on and Prince Charming. And we need baseball needs a pick me up. And it's really the commissioner and the players. And I'm going to basically say that the two sides. It's really ownership and the players. This is the one sport. They're tough, man. They're really tough. The players want those $300 million contracts, and guess what? They're getting them. They're still getting them. I mean, Fernando Tatis, great player, 22 years old, has 3 more years left of 3 more years left where he'd be under team control. And they went out and signed him this $40 million extension over 14 years, which tells me they see themselves getting out of this. I will say this: baseball needs to get back into the good graces of the average fan. I mean, there's rabid people like myself. Look, I have a son who plays minor league baseball. I'm into baseball, but the average fan, which this sport dominated for, in Boston, baseball was number one. Now it's the Patriots by far, and arguably the Celtics may be making a run with the Red Sox. But baseball, I think we got to quit worrying about trying to appease people that don't really like baseball. We're making up these gimmicky rules. Some of the rules. Let's just say the rule. It's in extra innings. They're going to do it again this year. I saw it in the minor leagues. It's a little weird, but you know what? It's interesting because a guy on second, no outs. You bunt him over. You try to hit him in. There is some strategy involved. I like that. College baseball did it. I mean, pro baseball did it first. College is trying it, and now it's in the major leagues. They're talking about obviously they want the pitchers to work faster. I think that's important. They want batters to stay in the batter's box. I like that. But, overall, I think we have to do a better job and as a sport. And when I say we, everyone that loves the game, promote the sport and the great part of the sport. And you know what the great part of the sport is, and it's coming out in our piece, really our baseball page, which is coming out at the end of this week and next week, is the players under 25 years old. I mean, this league has never had so much Mike Trout talent under 25 years old. There's at least 5 to 6 guys that could be on a verge of being the next Mike Trout. And Fernando Tatis, I think Juan Soto, who's arrogant, cocky kid there for Washington, he's as good as it gets. The White Sox have 3 under 25 players, 3, not 2, and that's not even talking the guy you stole for Chris Sale. The credit was it'll hit me. Who's third baseman, second baseman? Yeah, so Mercado, who looks like when he was here in Boston, looked like the next coming. Luis Robert is incredible. One of my favorite players, by the way. Adley Rutschman, catcher for the Orioles, unbelievable. Only 23 years old. Watch out with Tampa. Wander Franco, shortstop. He might be the best out of all of them. I saw him in one minor league game. I happened to be there in Pulaski, Virginia, 3 years ago. Two homers, a triple, and a double, 10 RBIs. I saw someone get 10 RBIs in a professional game. And I said, how old is this kid? Well, he was just he's 17, getting ready to turn 18. He's now 20. He's going to be a rookie this year. Good, and probably in the running for rookie of the year. Rafael Devers, Jimenez for the White Sox. God help him. Hope he's okay. As athletic, are you kidding me? He's only 24. Jordan Alvarez for the Astros, Brian Hayes for the Pirates, 24. The best players in the game, the most exciting, it's not just Mookie, and Mookie's good, but there's 3 guys under 25 who have a shot at winning MVP. That's never happened in this sport, ever, not even since going back to Babe Ruth.
No, it's incredible. There's no doubt about it. Speaking about all that youth, I'm excited to see the return of minor league baseball this year. It's going to be fun to go to a ballpark again and watch a game. I think that's one of the great things in America, being able to go out in the summer and sit on the lawn here in Indianapolis and watch some AAA baseball. So definitely looking forward to the start of the season. Bill, I agree with everything you said. We'll see. I know we're getting into draft time now. The NFL will start picking back up again here soon. Thanks a lot for your time. We'll talk to you again next week. Yeah,
we're waiting for Deshaun Watson to figure out his mess and where he's going to end up. And maybe he doesn't end up anywhere. Maybe it's too bad because he's really a wild card here. But guys are starting to fall into place. There hasn't been the wild turnover. We'll see what happens in Seattle with Russell Wilson. I don't see that working out well for Seattle. So.
No, not at all. Not heading in the right direction. No doubt about it.
All right. Thanks, George.
Thanks again to Bill. You can follow him for the New England Patriots and the Boston Red Sox at Burt Talks Sports. Now let's get a national perspective and check in with Clay Horning of CNHI Sports Oklahoma. Now time for our weekly spot with Clay Horning. And Clay, I really like the topic of your national. I always like the topic of your national column, but this week in particular, the inequality that we saw from what the amenities that the men's NCAA tournament teams were getting versus the women's teams. And, really, I thought it was a brave moment there by the Oregon women's basketball players to come out, put that on Twitter, put the pressure on the NCAA and make a change here. Can you elaborate a little bit on just how ridiculous this situation was?
Sure. A number of things, like I think within the bubble, weight room, fitness area, the women, it was literally a few dumbbells in a corner and yoga mats on a table. And the men's looked like a modern health club. The NCAA is itself in-house taking photographs of every men's game, but not shooting the women's games. And I believe those are, I believe that's in service of media operations that aren't traveling. So if you cover, I'm trying to think of it, just some random team, but Marist, which is in the tournament. And so Marist from somewhere upstate New York, can't remember the city it's in. Ithaca? Is it Ithaca? Anyway, Ithaca's in Ithaca. But anyway, I can't recall, but they're coming down to Texas. You might want pictures of the Marist women in your newspaper. Well, they better make it to the Sweet 16, or you better hire a stringer or something, because in an age of COVID, really, and that's a long trip for any whatever city that newspaper is, because I know it's not a big one. Marist is not in a big city, so it's just but the one that bothers me the most, or the one that hits me in the face the most, is I went to college in San Antonio, by the way. I went to Trinity. They're not playing games there. Division III, probably not enough seats. Well, doesn't matter seats, but anyway, maybe not as cool a facility. But they're playing at St. Mary's. They're playing at UTSA. And then, of course, they're playing in the Alamo Dome. Interestingly, they're not playing the AT&T Center or arena, whatever, where the Spurs play. But they're playing in the Dome. They're playing at 2 San Antonio universities, and they're playing in San Marcos, which is about 40 miles away. And then they're playing in Austin, which is another 15 miles, 20 miles from San Marcos, up I-35. And I think that's really cool. But if you see the men's tournament, it's NCAA on the baseline, and it's clear they've removed a court and put a court in. For the women's game, it's just whatever court is there, which there's nothing wrong with the courts. I mean, they're fine wooden courts, but it's so clear that somewhere along the line, somebody said, have you secured the gym? Yeah, we got the gym. Great, you're set. But over on the men's tournament, they said, you got the gym? Yeah. You got the court? Yeah. I mean, it's just, to me, what's breathtaking is what had to be going on. Get my hands in here with the men's tournament, here with the women's tournament simultaneously. And it's not dawning on anybody that they're not treating them remotely the same. And I would also, I'd point out that it is true that, CBS and it's, I'm sure their deal to broadcast the tournament is in the billions of dollars. And the deal that to broadcast the women's is a $500 million deal initiated in 2011 that runs for 14 years, that includes that and the Women's College World Series and the College World Series and the Frozen Four and the Women's Frozen Four. And, well, it's 23 or 4 championships in all. So, and I'm not sure the softball's not the highest rated, to be honest with you, but the point is, it's a lot of money. It's still $500 million over 14 years. And it's not like the NCAA is beholden to spend the money it's able to generate via women's sports and only use that pile on women's sports. They've got billions through the men's tournament. Their responsibility is to present them on a level playing field. And if that means, you're not, if that means you're spending some revenue generated by men on women, that's fine. I mean, that's absolutely fine. I understand why. I don't know what the best player in the WNBA is being paid. I know however many million LeBron is being paid, the best player in the WNBA is being paid approximately that many million less. So rounded to the nearest million, it's all of his salary, probably. So, and I don't have a quarrel with that. The NBA generates income. It does, the WNBA, but this is not that. This is not professional. The guideline should be Title IX, which I don't think the NCAA is subject to because it doesn't receive federal money, but everything it governs, but maybe ORU and maybe a couple other private universities, because if you even use, federal Pell Grants and whatnot as a private university, you're subject to Title IX. So just about every school it administers is subject to Title IX. It should act as though it is. And it occurred to me also as I was writing that column, which is why it made it in near the bottom. It's like that sometimes, is that these universities hire compliance staffs to catch them breaking the rules, because there are so many, it's hard to keep up with. But I mean, so what they do is they hire an entire staff of people to say, keep us in line, and we're not winking at you. We mean it. Keep us in line. The NCAA has not done that for itself, clearly. So anyway, it's you wonder how things get out of whack, and they just do. And you would have to. Have you ever interviewed Mark Emmert?
No.
You're right there in the state, but I mean, he's been there since 2010. I don't know if he has a point person for the men and a point person for the women. I don't know if he oversees both. I don't know how it works. What I know is, however it works, this has been going on and nobody's thought a thing about it, and that's an indictment. And I don't have the language in front of me. It's in my column, but he has, I guess, in a letter to member schools, the Washington Post got a hold of, said we're going to have an independent review, and there was some language, but it was basically to find out the processes that allowed this to happen. And as I wrote, and review those policies, he can call it the "kill me before I kill again" review. I mean, so it's just, it's, you are the problem, and if not you personally, it's on your watch, man. I mean, you hired who you hired, you adjudicated the way you adjudicated, you created the hierarchies that you created. So it's bad and wrong. And I'll say one more thing. When I was writing my column, and you might, as a writer, might get a kick out of this, that I began to write, even though, you know, the 500 million for the women's tournament and all these other championships runs over several years, making the point that it's not the money generated by the men. That's no reason to shortchange the women. And as I wrote that, I thought, it's not. I just thought, wow, I'm part of the problem if I'm going to read it like that. We don't want to shortchange them. You don't want to not short. You want to do it on the same plateau on this. So I caught where I was going, and that's why I hit ... But that's not even the right argument. So anyway, yeah, it's just interesting when it's all there to see, and it's always nice when the cause of it, you know, shows some shame. They've clearly been caught. Now we're going to do this review. I mean, in our political system, it seems one side is not capable of shame, and so we never get, okay, you caught us, we can cooperate now. It never happens, but I suppose it's happening at the NCAA level, which is something. So there.
You mentioned ORU there briefly, kind of the story of the tournament here in the first two rounds, 15 seed going on to the Sweet 16. What's feeling in Tulsa?
It's hard to root for ORU for reasons of what that institution has at least stood for over time. I mean, I would think a lot of people might even wonder who Oral Roberts is. He was a man, a televangelist that at one time claimed to be physically wrestling with the devil, and that he was going to be struck dead by God if he did not raise enough money to build City of Faith Hospital, which he built. I mean, so anyway, it's like they are Cinderella. I don't think the players there have any sense of where that university was 40 years ago, 30 years ago. Not that sort of, I don't want to get in trouble here, but I mean, you know, I mean, I guess what I would say is I think there are some pretty strong fundamentalist Christians that would look at that university and say, I don't know what that guy was thinking. So anyway, and in fact, the Roberts family does not run the university any longer. Richard Roberts ran it into the ground, and others took it over, his son. But anyway, yes, it's an amazing story. You know, that is where the Class 6A, that is where the Norman High girls won their state tournament. They won it in ORU's arena. So I love the story. Everything about me wants to root for the underdog. I struggle to root for that underdog, but I noticed, I just noticed, you know, there was a time when their players could have no facial hair, forget tattoos, whatever. So it's clear to me that, ORU is at least in some ways living in the real world now. So perhaps I can root for a 15 seed, even if it's them. You know what? But their head coach, and you'd have to remind me his name right now. I can't pull it.
Paul Mills.
What?
Paul Mills.
Okay, he's bound to be mentioned for a coaching position that just came up in Norman, Oklahoma. Not only are the Sooners needing to hire Sherry Cole's successor, they are now needing to hire Lon Kruger's successor. And would you like me to give you 1 minute on Lon Kruger?
Absolutely.
Well, I always go back to what I wrote about Kruger the day he was hired. OU was trying to hire the successor of Jeff Capel, who brought in Blake Griffin, gone to the Elite Eight, and had some success, but then had an assistant coach get caught up in real skullduggery. Who I think I know his name in my head, but I'm not positive, so I won't mention it. But anyway, I mean, like, he was giving money to players. He was, he was fired. OU went on probation, yada yada. But what Capel lost in that was really his connection into the AAU world to go out and get players. I mean, I think that guy was sort of Capel's hired gun to find players, find them within the rules. I actually think, as far as Jeff Capel knew, but that's not what happened. And for 2-3 seasons, OU just went from good to middling to bad. And I'm giving you a lot on Jeff Capel here. And they eventually had to let him go, not because he couldn't coach, but because there were just no prospects. No players of merit were coming into the program. So I think what the conventional wisdom is, they just backed up the Brinks truck for Lon Kruger to get him out of UNLV over and over and over again. Nobody seemed to want the job. And they just kept going back to Lon, and eventually he accepted for a lot of money. And today, at some point, I'm going to look at how much he was making, and you'll probably find that given his success in the nation, he was horribly overpaid. But given where the program was and needing to put a floor underneath it, that was worth it to OU to hire that guy. But the day he was hired, I wrote that if he's as good here as he was everywhere else, Florida, Illinois, Kansas State. Before Kansas State, it was then called Texas Pan Am. Now it's Texas Rio Grande Valley. If he's as good here as he was good there, every other there, he would still not be in the same neighborhood as Billy Tubbs or Kelvin Sampson. And Sampson and I didn't particularly get along when I covered him, but I've got to give him his due. He won at a high level for an extended period of time. And so anyway, and as it happens, he was about at OU like he was everywhere else. So OU basketball fans, I think, are very appreciative of Kruger. But I am going to write today in the farewell column that they should still want more, because we've had more here. And in fact, I could turn my computer around and you might be able to see Lloyd Noble Center through my blinds, because I live across the street from sort of the athletic fields part of campus in a condo. So anyway, this place, or Lloyd Noble, can be filled up again. Kruger kind of saved the program, took it to a Final Four, which he's done, I think, a couple other times. But then 2 years later, he's lost 18 games, and then he trudges his way back to the tournament. You're always climbing up that mountain or tumbling down it. He was never staying, at the high base camp. And there's a great metaphor. So anyway, that's the story of Lon Kruger. And I don't know who it might be, but it'd be OU basketball at one point was basically a top 10 program, men and women, probably at least 5 years, but over 10 to 15 years if you let it bounce a little bit. So we'll see. I don't know who it's going to be, but it's always fun. It's because now the possibilities become endless again.
Yeah, absolutely.
It'll work out, but it might.
Yeah, lots of coach searches going on. We got one here in Indiana that causing a lot of consternation as well. So I'm sure a lot of news to be broken next couple of weeks here. And thanks again for your time, Clay, and we'll talk again next week.
All right. Thanks, man.
Thanks as always to Clay. You can follow our national columnist at Clay Horning. And thanks again to all of you. We'll check in again with you next week.